Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to do a presentation that I have worked on before, and it's been really hard to do. I'm not sure why, but it's I've done the simplest way now so that you can follow along and that you can see me. This is in the it's just the details of the presentation that the arrows and things just go all over the place, and I'm not sure why. So, but if you're wanting to know the different parts of your wheelchair, I did the simplest one. So there are some parts that are really obvious, but sometimes they're not. So you want to be able to go back to this presentation. If something breaks, or if something, or you just can't think of the word, you can go back to this presentation and say, oh, yeah, that's what it was called. So I am going to go through the different parts and just put a little bit more detail in there and why it's called what it's called. Some of the parts are taken from cars, so it's easy to remember, and some parts are not. So, and both types of wheelchairs, power wheelchairs and manual wheelchairs, are a little bit different. So, we'll talk about that. So, all right, so let's go to the power wheelchair first. And some of these parts are like really obvious, but some parts are not. And some parts, sometimes we go into blanks. It's like, oh, what was that called? Because something's not working okay, and I gotta call the salesperson, or I gotta call the garage and see what we can do. So this is just a little help so you can figure out and go back to this and figure things out. Okay. So on the power wheelchair, you have, I'm going to start from the top. It's headrest. So that can be a mobile headrest, or it can be just a regular headrest. uh, Captain seat. So these usually power wheelchairs have captain seats. So if something's wrong or something's loose, it's a captain seat. So or the so captain seat. Then we have the joystick, obviously, but sometimes we can forget the name of it. So it's joystick. It's the little thing that we use to drive. So sometimes we just the words just don't come to us, either because we're really frustrated or really tired. So it's called the joystick. Armrest, obviously, that comes from the car. Armrest, so it's easy to remember. um, Footrest. Here I need to fix the spelling, but it's a footrest. So that is an odd word. So footrest. So that it doesn't matter the style. It's a footrest. On my footrest, there can be other objects on the footrest to help us. I have a strap that goes over the footrest. It is screwed onto the bottom of my footrest because my left foot, I don't have feeling. So, with the bumps and stuff and the turns and twists, sometimes my left foot slips off. And that can be a little dangerous because it can get caught. So, and crushed. Especially in my power wheelchair. So they put a strap on there. So my feet get tucked under the strap, and then I don't have to worry about it. All right. So what is this thing right here that we're going to go over to the fork here? And the fork is what holds the caster. So these two parts are kind of integral. The caster is the wheel, the back wheel that you're seeing here. And then what holds the caster in place is called a fork. Now, you would never think that that's what it's called. You would call it bar or whatever it might be. All right. Sorry about that. We had a little interruption. So on the right side, you'll see fork, and that is a heavy duty metal piece that holds the caster in place. And the caster is the small wheels. Anything that's a small wheel on a power wheelchair is called caster. That is kind of an off name that we wouldn't think of. So that is a caster. Now on your right side, you'll see an arrow pointing to the big wheel. That's what I usually call it, but it's called front wheel. Power wheelchairs, there's 3 types of, wheels. We have front wheel, mid wheel, or, I think it's back wheel? Yeah. So, but this one is a front wheel because it's in the front, obviously. And then if you have it in the middle, it's called mid wheel. And then if you have it in the back, well, it's called the back wheel. So I think so. But these are the basic parts. There are obvious parts, under the casing in the back. You're going to have the batteries and those kind of things. So those are not too hard to remember. Sorry about that. So, this is the basics of the power wheelchair. Now we're going to go to the manual wheelchair, which changes a bit. So, let's see what we can do to unconfuse you. All right. As you can see, the manual wheelchair has a whole lot more. So, some of them are similar to the power wheelchair. All right. So, you have the backrest. Their seating is divided into 2 parts. So, you have the backrest, you have the seat cushion, you have the axle, which is this is a folding manual wheelchair, so it has an X in the back, and that's the called the axle there, folding axle. Then you have the calf strap, which is in the back. If you had a strap lower on the bottom, closer to the footrest, that would be called a heel strap. So just a heel strap. And then let's see, the footrest, so that that's pretty obvious. And then on the right side, we have the push handle. So that's called a push handle. So sometimes that's a little hard to think of. Push rims. So that's going to be a little obvious. The rims that you use to push the manual wheelchair, those are called push rims. So a real rear wheel. So you wouldn't think that that would be called a rear wheel, but it's called a rear wheel because it's in the back. So it's like duh. But you would call the main wheel or the big wheel or something, but it's called rear wheel. The brakes, which don't show up very well here, but the brakes, and that's kind of obvious. But if it slips from your mind, you can go back to this video and say, "Oh yeah, the brakes." Then in the back, you have the tip assist bar. This little curved bar there. It's called the tip assist. Then the fork. Now, in manual wheelchairs, there are a lot of different types of forks. And so you have to this one is a regular fork, it looks like. So there are a lot of different types and models of forks. So you'd have to talk to, the store or to the garage in terms of your fork, if it's cracked, if it's loose, so that's the fork. That's not something a word you would think of right away. You would think of like a bar that holds the caster or something. It's called a fork to eat with. I don't know. So, and there's the caster. The manual wheelchairs have casters, and there are different sizes. So, usually, the bigger the caster, the better it can get over cracks and holes and stuff like that. So, the bigger the caster, the smaller it will get stuck in cracks, on the sidewalk and things. So, you want to consider um, what size of caster you want. That's always a big question. So this is it, folks. I have done this presentation before, and it is really, really been hard to do. Just because the arrows sometimes go all over the place and you're trying to stretch them and trying to connect them to the words, and it just drives me crazy. So it really is a challenge to do these presentations. So I'm glad I had time to try this again and not have anything flashing, not have anything moving all over the place. So so really, really, I appreciate your patience on this one. I think it's good to have it available so that if you have to call for any kind of repair, that it's there, that it's available, and then you can review it, or just say, "Oh God, I gotta call the garage and I gotta call the part for what it is so they understand what I'm talking about. Where was Lisa's presentation on the parts of the wheelchair?" So so they understand what I'm talking about. Ah! So yeah, feel free to pull up this presentation again, to learn your parts. If you forget them, the presentation is there, and this one is a tricky one to do. There are a lot more parts in the manual wheelchair, and there are a lot more parts in the power wheelchair, but for this time, I just wanted to do the basics and make sure it's available to help you. All right. So any questions, any concerns, anything that I might have forgotten that might be critical for people to remember, add them in there down below. And if you have any stories about forgetting the part and not being able to describe it to the garage or to the store, feel free to add them in here, because I've had those issues in which I get brain fogged and can't describe to them what I'm talking about. So anyway, I thought this would be good to have in the collection there for Wheelchair Tech Friday. So I'm hoping you all are well. Thank you so much for coming and spending a few moments with me and looking at these different parts. You can obviously read them, so that's really important. But if you have difficulty reading them, then you have my voice that will follow. You can follow along. All right, take care, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one.